Hello, we are live. Today is Sunday, September 4th, 2016, and we're having our fourth webinar on emergency preparedness. And I welcome Sean and Joanna who are with me. The message of today is that the disasters will not be total. The collapse, the global economic collapse will not be total. There will be islands and pockets of different realities, islands and pockets and rivers of different realities mixing together. There will be still strong powers. There will be still happy people. There will be still opportunities. The communications would not completely go down. It will be very different from the disasters of the past, since there will be much more of higher energies. There will be much more of four-dimensional clouds. There will be more miracles, more help. And you will be the ones who are keeping it up. You will be the ones who keep up the higher dimensional property, higher dimensional vibration. You still have time. You still have work to do. Working on yourself, upgrading yourself, building up your spiritual muscle, connecting to the grid, developing telepathy, developing empathy. Your path is outlined. You came here for a purpose, and now the purpose is more visible, more defined. There is more shine, more light on the other end. You still have tons of free choices, tons of free choices. Lessons to learn on the way. Understand this is an experiment, and it's not the last experiment, not the first experiment. It's one of many. You came here not only to uplift the earth, you came here to see the flaws in the design of the experiment, the flaws in the design of the world, the flaws in the design of the matrix. You came here, you dived in, an avatar dived in, descending spirit, descending higher self came down. You came down to see the flaws in the matrix, and see how it needs to be fixed next time. That's the idea. You are the creators of the matrix. You are the engineers, the working bees the great designers of the Matrix, and you come down here to experience it. And there is only way to experience by disconnecting. That's how you came down, partly, largely disconnected, and now you reconnect again to send their readouts up. And that's what you do in your daily meditations. The intention of your daily meditation is send the information up. Lift up the matrix and send information up. So you dive into the reality. Get your vibration messed up. You absorb the darkness, absorb the distortions, and then you meditate and send information up. And that will help you build better matrices in the future, better Earths in the future, Earths, planets, civilizations, genomes. How do you build a better human in the future? Any questions? All right, so from my past, there were periods in history when things went up. It's not the first period in the history when the magic was in the air, when magical possibilities were in the air. Years past, I would say 30 years, where the magic was there, but it was personal. Yeah, the magic was there, it was personal. So you could deviate from the mainstream, but there was so clearly pronounced mainstream where miracles were lacking, few miracles, very few, too little. But there were periods in the history when miracles were huge, and they were mainstream miracles, global miracles, collective miracles. I guess in America that would be the era of hippies, when the whole matrix of social life was shifting. Suddenly things became possible. Suddenly things became turned upside down. Everyone was wearing long hair. That was, the whole world went crazy, right? And it was positive. And musicians were the ones who made it. Actually, musicians. It was music who made this transformation. What wasn't possible with logic, political activity, was made with music. And even not the words of the songs. The words of the songs were secondary. It was the music of the songs which made the change. It was, of course, Beatles and beyond. It was rock and roll and beyond. It was the music which sounded, which was everywhere. It was in the air. It was shifting the minds. It was shifting the matrix. In Russia, it was the same time, actually. It was parallel. It was the whole earth was shifting. It's not only America. In Russia, there was absolutely no American music. There was less than fraction of percent of American music, and it was, and that American music that came through was largely censored. It wasn't real one. You couldn't hear even Beatles there at a certain point. In early 60s, no. It was all Russian made, but it was translated, basically. It was Russified. Yeah, Russified. Sovietified, communistified. There is no word for that. Yeah, Russified. It was translated So everything had to be homemade and made in Russia. So all culture had to be made in Russia. But the ones who made it, Russian musicians, Russian cinematographers, and all other sorts, artists, theater artists, actors, they were watching. They were allowed to watch the foreign movies. He listened to foreign music and then interpret, translate. So it was censored, selected, but it did change the world, even in Russia. So 60s, early 60s, I told the history of Stanislavski, and I cross it out. Stanislavski is another great man. A little early, here it is, Smoktunovsky. And Innocentis Smoktunovsky was the single man who changed, single actor who changed the voice of the generation. He was the first one to make the wave. And talking about survival, so he had the talent of running away and hiding. The person who changed the world had to survive first. So he grew up young, talented, elevated, romantic. And I think at the time of the war, he was like 17 when the Second World War started. When Germans invaded, everybody was drafted. He was drafted too. And he immediately, Germans were advancing like at the speed of 30 miles an hour. Like they were like really running on tanks forward, without stop. So in a few days, they just made it almost to Moscow. Not maybe in a few weeks. So lots of people ended up in their captured, how do you call it? Military captured, captives. That is a word for that. So he was captured, and he was aware that you will not be good if they take you to the Germany on the train. He was aware. He was smart enough to understand. He was smart, but he was educated enough to understand. Not everybody understood, really. So he had to kill his guard, maybe another 18 years old man. He doesn't tell how he did it, but it was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in the village. And it was, I think, in Belarus, basically, lots of forests around. So he ran into the forest. And he almost died from hunger there, because it's not very easy to survive in the forest, even in the summer. So finally, he ended up finding a house, a little house with people living, only women, because all men went to the war. And they fed him, and he recovered, and then he went to fight against Germans as a guerrilla squad of Russian army, basically the Russian army on German occupied territory. So he fought well, and then the war ended, and he knew, they were smart enough, again, they were educated enough to understand that if you have been captured before, the totalitarian system trace you and they will prosecute you. So he had to run away again, now from Russians. And he did. So in Russia, the easiest way to hide, and he was ingenious in that, is to go in the places where they would send you anyway, but you wouldn't go there as persecuted, but you go there as a free person, as a free person. So he went all the way to north, where they would send the prisoners. And there is like a camp, prisoners inside, and service people outside, basically, the guards and other people who ran away. And there he joined a local theater. And surprise, in the farthest part of the Russia, northernest, beyond the polar circle, it's like Whole summer is day and whole winter is night. I've been there. In the theater, there were best talents of Russia, because they also ran away there during the war and ended up there. So he had best teachers in artists in actors' art. And then he stayed there until the totalitarian regime basically ended. Stalin died, and there were clearly the spring in the air. And then he went to Moscow, And as a talented actor, he was picked up soon by one of the best producers in a theater. And there, like, I think it was 1958, after 5 years after Stalin died, Smoktunovsky made that new voice. So before that, there was the voice of 50s, and the voice of 50s in America, it was pretty much the same in Russia. It was all over the world. And then it had to be transformed. As I don't know who did transformation in America. I think it was beatniks. I'm pretty sure it was beatniks. That's why Beatles were called Beatles after beatniks. So beatniks brought a new beat. And the beatnik in Russia was Smoktunovsky. He didn't behave like a beatnik, but he played, it was Hamlet by Shakespeare, right? He played it with a new voice, which is intimate, basically, intimate voice. It would be the voice of Zachariah yesterday. Intimate. Really, really intimate voice in theater, which was unthinkable before. There were a few others who did it, but he was the one who made that a big event in theatrical theater. So people were coming. It was fully sold. His performances were fully sold, and they picked it up. It went to the movies. It went everywhere. So it went from totalitarian to intimate. That's it. So he did this huge change, like what Beatles did to the voice in America, and some others did. Tell me who it was. Same thing was done by one person, and basically he had to know when to run away and when not to run away and when to hide. That's a huge art, and you don't have the information usually. You try to get it, but it's usually you have very little. And now again, we have very little. There is so much on the surface that you don't really know what's going to happen. My understanding is that the decision has been made to proceed with a crisis. And there was obviously the whole idea of the crisis coming in 2012. So we were preparing for that. But by some reason, it didn't happen. I don't know why, but it didn't. Now it's 4 years later, and the crisis is still needed to clear up the economy. But I understand this time that it might be not as disastrous as you would be thinking. It might be like a controlled crisis. So the main idea of the disastrous crisis is for the banks to close, wait until people realize that the money are lost, rename the banks, rename them, and open again fresh with a new possibly global or maybe local. Maybe it would be stepwise. Yeah, they will close, open, crash, close, open, as it was in Russia. The major bank just went bust, and then smaller banks went bust, and at the end, nobody had any money except a few, and it started fresh, and the money was devalued. So there are two paths. One is inflation, where you just devalue all the money, so everybody starts from nothing, or you just replace, do reform and just decide to start start from scratch, which is about the same. But basically, the idea is that you have to rebuild the finances, and they're playing with all these scenarios, like how to rebuild them. And I don't want to go into detail because I don't understand the detail. I think that's sufficient. That understanding is sufficient, that they want just to wipe it out and start fresh, and they want it global. Everybody wants global. The aliens want advice it to be global, and the cabal is wants it global. So the globalization of finances is in everybody's interest. They're pretty much global now, but finally global. I need a breath, so I invite comments and questions. All right. The comment is that there is no comments and questions. All right. Now, one of the questions I'm getting is, why do we dive into the negativity? Why don't we stay positive and ignore the idea of the crisis? And I don't have an answer, except answers from alien friends. They say some things you can ignore and some things you shouldn't. And this one is the one you shouldn't. That's simple answer. Yeah, ignore things which you can ignore, right? Like I need an example. Yeah, if you cross the street, you can ignore traffic if you follow the stoplight signs, right? You can don't pay attention to the cars. You wait for the cross sign and cross the this little white man sign and cross the road on. Or you can ignore the stoplight and just look at the traffic, but you can't ignore. You shouldn't ignore both, right? Very simple, right? So some things are so important, you have to really pay attention. You can't pretend there is no traffic. I mean, that's a good example. Yeah, you can pretend that there is no traffic. You just cross the road whenever, but it's unlikely that especially in a busy city, you will be able to ignore it for a while. So same thing with global events. Some things are in this matrix. It's all illusionary, right? Some things are more real. It's all illusion, but some things in illusion are more illusionary and some things are more real. So when it is decided by the collective to proceed, it's possible to ignore, but then you become more disconnected from the reality. So if you want to play this reality, you probably want to pay attention. Now, when it happens, I don't know. Every September I expect it. September is the year, if you just look at the history of global collapses, usually they happen in September. Why? Because they are planned. All of these collapses are planned. Above and below. They are planned, and usually they happen on Monday. Why? Because there is 2 days and weekend for the forces to prepare. They already know. They plan, and so they close the banks, they move things around like gold and stuff, and then on Monday they're already prepared. So, oh gosh, today's Saturday. Yeah, the step one is to get as much cash as you can from your accounts, if you have any cash on accounts. And I forgot to do that. Oh, today's what? Sunday already. All right, hopefully it's Monday, but nothing will happen. Yeah, I know I'm attracting by my worry, I'm attracting the things. But when it is global, the desires of one person are not as significant. I hope we will go through this exercise, and then we will lift the mood up, and we'll have this And we have this uplifting. We do this uplifting habitually, and we develop this muscle. So when it really happens, you will say, oh, yeah, sure. And you will be ready, basically. There's a question. Despite thinking that a world crisis is something bad, when I think this topic only get positive love and vibrations. Thanks, John. Oh yeah, oh yeah, ayana you mala so there were other bright times, and yeah, 60s, and before that 1900s. In 1900s there was also like the revolution was in the air, and there was tons of positivity happen. It was like World Fair in Chicago, World Fair in Paris. First one was in Paris and then Chicago, I think. And higher dimensional energies were there. That's when Tesla was dreaming of the future, and he sensed a lot of things from 100 years ago, for 100 years forward, 150 years forward. And we live in the same predicament. Yeah, John Lennon understood. He said, you know, you think spring is coming, and really just a glimpse of the spring. The great things will happen when we're not here anymore. That's what John Lennon understood, really. Like, you know, he did the transformation in the 60s. He started one of the biggest first waves, but he understood he wouldn't see the other waves, and the other waves are still coming. So they will be coming for next 150 years, right? But again, one of the biggest waves is coming, and be ready for it. So when the good wave is coming, when the positive things happen, there will be lots of opportunity to create and to participate. And even if you're incapable to participate in person, participating spiritually and mentally could be sufficient, right? When you are plugged into the matrix, when you're plugged into the grid, you don't really have to do anything physically. You don't really have to be present there. Being present gives you experience, gives you hands-on participation, but just being plugged in is sufficient. So some of us are here just to be plugged in, for sure. Just to stay, you know, you can be a hermit, a hermit, and just uphold the vibration and do nothing than meditate, or do nothing than washing dishes, or do nothing than grow plants, and still you uphold the vibration because you're aware. So upholding this vibration is job number one, right? And as I said, wonderful things were happening. Like so I was maybe 19, and I was starting to work in the lab, and everything was fresh for me, right? Was it 19? So it was 89 minus 64. Yeah, pretty much. Something like that sort, around 20s. All right. 69, 89, yeah, 89 maybe. So there was perestroika, democracy, free market. All these ideas were around. And we had the government system of funding of science. And it was very hierarchical, you know, as it is actually now. It's still very hierarchical. It's less hierarchical here, but in the past it was all planned. In Russia, it was all centralized, so it's all federal. Everybody was a federal employee. You can't imagine, right? Everybody is a federal employee. Everybody has a rank, and you can only go within the structure through the ranks. And very few formal interviews were there. It was all just jumping between the cells in the ranking system through connections. And it's not as frequent. People worked on one job for many, many, many years, not like here now. Okay, so our boss was, he's still alive. He's older than I, maybe 10 years only. So he was advanced. He was from the family of advanced scientists who were allowed abroad. So he traveled abroad, studied abroad, worked abroad. So he had this understanding of irrationality of the system. He had an understanding how it works abroad. He had but he was, how do you say, I don't want to say anything negative, but he was a negative guy. Oh, no, not negative. I would say a predator guy. Yeah, he was a typical professional predator. That's how you got become a boss, right? You have to be a predator, like a fighter in American Manager's third chakra. So he was not as strong third chakra, but strong enough to project his will and be strong leader of dictatorial type. But he said, let's play democracy. Let's vote. So we have that funding, and we have flexibility to give bonuses. How about we start voting for the bonuses for people? Let's do democracy. And that was an amazing experiment. It just illustrated how flawed is the idea of democracy. When people started voting, it clearly became clear that it's unfair what people decide collectively. Because if you are popular, people vote for you. If you're just a good worker but nobody knows you, which is typical, especially in science, you're not supposed to go and present your program. You just do a good work and publish. But people don't read each other's papers, so people have no clue who is a good worker, but they know who is popular. So populism was rewarded. So if you go around and say what people like, you become popular. So it was a beautiful illustration how unfair was the public vote for distributing bonuses. So imagine now, the idea of a collective, a commune, is the idea of communism, right? Commune. It is around for the whole life of humanity, right? So people have to live together and be nice to each other. And best known communes are actually, the commune is where the relationship between people are not monetary, basically, within the commune. If people buy stuff within the commune, it's not commune anymore. So monastery is a best working example. So monasteries existed through the whole life of humanity, and typically they are very hierarchical. There is usually one leader or a group of leadership of elders, and there people work and do everything, and work and pray and serve others. Usually they have churches, and people come there to pray, and that's the main business of the monastery. They don't only live for their own labor, they also provide spiritual, religious services to their others, to outsiders. So that's a very good business model and very good commune model, and it worked. It works for the whole life of humanity. Monasteries do work. So if you look for the principles how to build a commune, the monastery would be one of them. And the second would be kibbutzes in Israel is agricultural collective farms. And originally they started agriculture. Now they can do any sort of services. Many of them went into technology and production, so they're factories actually. But again, between the members, the distribution of wealth is not based on money. So there are usually, it's possible for isolate examples, but imagining the whole humanity to go into non-monetary exchanges, it's not easy. It wouldn't happen right away. And I can see how some people are so used to go and grab more than they need, and some people are so used to fight. We are so used to fight. Yeah, even in our community, I value fighters, right? You can see on the street in groups, you can see people who are always in emergency mode, always in an emergency mode. They're so used to be in the emergency mode that they are locked into it. And you can see them by the idea of being locked. Their position is locked. Their reaction is locked. I'm frequently in emergency mode, but I practice getting out of it. I do practice, and I'm pretty good in getting out of it. So I'm good in jumping to emergency mode and getting out of it. So talking about this brings me to the emergency mode, and it's like two motors working against each other. One is, we're talking about emergency, you have to go into emergency mode. And second is, relax, relax, relax. Get out of the emergency mode. You're best when you're not in emergency mode. So go, it's like breathing, go into and out. Understand when you go into emergency mode, you block so many energy flows. Like typically, like you can say, all humans are so damaged because we are trained to get into emergency mode. It's like stress, work environment. Sometimes on job situation, you are chosen for the ability to be in emergency mode. You have to, like a soldiers, to be like super fast answering super quickly, think super quickly, and always keep track of things around. That's required. Yeah, like fight and flight response, stress. So breathing is one of the first tools to getting out of the emergency mode. Meditation, like yesterday, the webinar with Zachariah was so elevating, so exciting. I was so happy the whole day. I was so high, I couldn't meditate. I go into meditation and I'm so awake, so excited. So it took me maybe whole 15 minutes of meditation just to get back to relaxed, and get on the other side another 15 minutes. But I was able to. And some days I'm not. So cutting down on coffee, and you really need to get out. You need to get back to relax, be intimate, be open, be united with the outside. Because emergency mode, your shield is closed. Your senses are high, but your shield is closed. So it's like shield is closed and senses are high, something like that. And when you relax, your inner core is your higher self, and then you're one with the environment. You unblock yourself, basically. You reunite with everything, with the one, with the creation. tons of ways to uplift your stress and come back to a relaxed state. It's essential. Any more comments, questions? I want to switch the topic again. I mentioned inflation is one of the ways to equalize people's I don't know this word, poorness. Make everybody poor equally. Not wealth, but lack of wealth. To equalize. So if you just wipe everybody's account, that's one of the ways. And you can start fresh with the new systems. I don't think they have the new systems. You really have, people in economy and in politics, some bright people, especially the ones on outside of the system, who are thinking freely. They have the idea what needs to be done, and tons needs to be done legally and so on. But again, who is deciding? Private property, like in America, there is lots of, every bit of land is private property, right? Some are federal property, some is state property, some is private property. You can't really get out of the car and walk in the forest for any reason, right? Usually. In Canada, you can, just cross the border, and there, just perception of private property is different. In Canada, you can easily wander around and safely. Some of that is government, some of it is private, but they're not as paranoid. And similar, I would say, in Europe is pretty similar. It's only very dense. There is so much denser population in many places. And in Russia, it's all federal. So people just have no idea that you can step on somebody else's property. There is a fence, but even fences are, private and federal, so you can easily jump over the federal fence, and usually it's okay. And there is tons of holes in the fences, so you just go through the holes. So neither of those, federal property, private property, or in between, neither of those is functional, because most of the land is empty anyway. Like, there's lots of unused land and land which is not taken care of, which is okay, but it's on the way of many things. Yeah, talking about economy. Unemployment is so ridiculous, right? Why would people be unemployed, right? It makes no sense. If you want to work, why can't you just start working, right? For outsiders, it makes no sense how people can not allow other people to work. And it's the whole system which prohibits people from working, right? I tried many times. Like when I was unemployed, not a good expression, but when I was perceiving myself as unemployed, that's a better expression. When I was perceiving myself as unemployed, I tried to start many new businesses, like many tens of businesses I tried during my life. And some businesses were obviously had a good product or good service, a very good service, and I try to push it, and I see how it's either in Russia or in America. It just, there are forces that prohibit you from getting your product to the customers. Here in San Diego, I have tons of, for some reason, Lightworkers are healers. I communicate with lots of healers, and all of them, every one of them, wants to get their service, whatever modality, Reiki, massage, other modalities, to the customers. And there is so many barriers on the way to that. Like some people need the service, but they have to go, there is no way for the provider and the customer to connect. So there is so many barriers on that. And usually these are guilds. In America, this would be guilds of providers. So like if you're a healer, there is like medical guild, which prohibits outsiders who don't have a medical degree from entering and providing the services. There is massage guild, acupuncture guild. Reiki is not limited, but beyond that, all other health services are very regulated, and even more that you have to pay an entry fee, a big entry fee, and big fee for just having the practice, periodic fee. Like any doctor's office, they pay tons of extra money beyond what the services they provided just for being in the business. I would say maybe 90%. 90% of what they pay has nothing to do with their services, but only with being protected. Like they have to be part of the insurance network and medical insurance, and then liability. So these are main fees they pay, and these are huge, right? And it kind of goes without saying, people know that. So when things become reformed, one of the ways, it was always done in Russia, and I think in Europe also, and I think in America also, it was providing, I don't know how the word in English, but in Russia it was called coupons. So basically the city, usually it was the city or the federal government, would give people a replacement of money. So you will have dollars or rubles which are worth nothing, and you would have also coupons for specific, food stamps. Yeah, that would be called food. In Russian it was called coupons, but here it's called food stamps. So most of the people would receive equal number of food stamps, fuel stamps, and other stuff. So when the money system stops working, and to keep people equally poor but above their starvation level, their government, the local government or federal government, would give people food stamps and will centralizedly push some resources to keep people alive. Yep. Just so again, I assume there will be controlled collapse. I don't know when. One of September's, I would say. Possibly, like more probable than usual, than average. And lots of it will be pockets, and biggest, more stronger pockets of wealth would be military. Of course, they have like many years worth of resources. They keep fuel, they keep food and stuff like that. So they will be prepared. Not all of them, but many of them. And again, different countries would be different, I would say. And as Pentim said, there will be broadcasts. They will claim the power. They will exercise the power. They will do what they usually do, military leadership, military dictatorship. I would say in civilized countries, they possibly would be more civilized, right? Because of the culture. In less civilized countries, it will be more like in the old times, more like the dictatorship. And I don't know how big would be the riots. It could be big in some areas. It could be small in other areas. I think the riots go after the waves of energy, the riots. So you can see at some points the riots just go very strong, but there are waves of energy guiding them. So sometimes things happen which should cause a riot, and there is no riots. And on other There is no reason but the riots happen. So best example of that was the 1968. There is a wonderful book called 1968, and what happened was great illustration that riots happen for some supernatural reasons in countries which are isolated from each other. In the same year, there was a wave of riots, a wave of free thinking. So basically, there was a wave of energy, like as now we have the waves of four-dimensional energy. There was a wave of some sort of upgrading energy, maybe four-dimensional, whatever you call it. So people just started thinking freely and started going out on the streets and demonstrating. Most famous, I think, were riots in Czechoslovakia at that time. In Russia, they were minimal, but still there was something in '68. And in Mexico, in America, it was huge. It was huge riots. Very famous, very profound. Basically, they shaped the future. They shaped the reality. They transformed the reality. Was Chicago Convention also at that time? Possibly. I was 4, and we weren't paying attention. So, but you guys can Google easily. So the point is, the riots were independent in different countries. Sometimes they hear about each other, but sometimes they didn't hear because in Russia it was all blocked. In other countries, all the communication was blocked, so it wasn't transfer of direct information. It was supernatural, super above cultural. So we'll see how it goes. There are rumors that the riots in Ukraine were engineered and they exercised their some kind of electromagnetic technology to induce the riots. I have no clue to know, but I know the technology is out there. It's possible to regulate the waves up or down. You can activate the crowd, you can inhibit the crowd, and make everybody feel bored and go home. So I wouldn't be surprised that would happen. That technology would be used to calm down riots if needed. So with all the darkness around, if it happens, again, I think it would happen in waves. I was thinking it would happen at once and it will have global collapse and everything would be stopped. I'm getting answers through different channels that it's unlikely and it wouldn't last long. So I was thinking about economy going. So my estimate was that in 5 years, the economy will go down and stay down for 5 years. So that was my estimate. So 2021 to 2026, I was thinking that we'll have complete standstill, no electricity, nothing at all. And the answer was from higher sources. They say not unlikely that. There will be pockets of normal life. Their humans will rebuild, restructure things. The prices will change, the money will change, but it wouldn't be complete collapse of everything. Some cities will survive, the whole city. Some cities are prepared and they have enough resources to, even if the money go down, they have enough resources to survive the crisis and keep going. Because the key, you have to have water running, and trash removed. If you have water running and trash removed, everything else is, other processes are slower. People would adjust. They can go migrate, but if water goes down, electricity goes down anymore, then the big city becomes unlivable, like in a few days. So there would be a big exodus from cities, and it really depends where it is, because some farms would protect themselves, some farmers would shoot people, trying to approach, and other farmers would possibly house the people, right? So it really depends. And an episode of that kind happened in, I think it was 1940, plus minus 1 year. Paris was occupied by Germans, and there was a huge exodus from Paris. People just walked by foot, ran on cars and other things. So it was a big humanitarian disaster. People who were used to civilized life just ended up in the heat, in the road, without water or food, and no support. And locals didn't help. I don't know, obviously some did help, but in general, people from the city were so separate from locals, they didn't get much support. So people were dying on the road, or dying. And their most, what's that word, unexpected thing was that people who stayed in Paris were fine. Because what happened, there was an undercover agreement between Germans and French. French allowed the Germans to basically secretly gave up and allowed Germans to occupy the French. So the military, what's that word, defected? Maybe defect, that is a word. So military kind of, it was a hidden agreement to defect the country. And Germans, in exchange, didn't destroy it. Basically, there was no fight. They just occupied the country, occupied Paris, and there was nothing, no resistance. Maybe little pockets, but the main resistance wasn't there. The main military resistance wasn't there. There was, after that, there was guerrilla resistance, but it was different. So Paris was just fine. Germans came there. There was no destruction of the civil life. They continued the economy. But the ones who fled Paris, fearing the fights and their violence, they were in big trouble. So again, sometimes maybe you don't want to leave the city and see what happens. And there is no way of knowing, right? Unless you know, unless you do your research, unless you are aware of things coming, and unless you have higher guidance. There are tons of examples of higher guidance. From my personal life, our friend was working in the Twin Towers. I had a job. A friend of our friend. We actually met them only once. But he was working in the Twin Towers, and on the day before, he had a financing. On the day before of the destruction of Twin Towers, of terrorist attack, his fiancé cooked something, and it made him violently sick, so he couldn't go to work. And there were tons of examples like that. People just ended up not being there for obscure reasons. And he survived, and he married her. I'm sure, there were tons more published. Some people were scheduled to be on Titanic and they weren't there. Some people were scheduled to fly on a flight which could crash, and at some point they were miraculously saved from that. So this angelic guidance is there full force. So if you are supposed to survive, you will survive. As I mentioned, my understanding is that this terrible Second World War, the terrible it was divinely guided by all forces, positive and negative forces. They were kind of agreed on the outcome. And the biggest outcome of the Second World War, and I think it is also in textbooks as well, it's a public knowledge, is that two major totalitarian powers of the world annihilated each other. I sort of knew that answer, but I didn't accept it. Now I do. So obviously, if the balance wasn't kept, if either one or another was more victorious, then the whole history of the world would change. The fact that they both were devastated allowed America to went up, to go down, went up, go to rise, allowed America to rise, and with all the totalitarian, how they say, with all the dominant idea of America, it still is much more gentle and much more civilized than would be either one of them, right? With all the distortions, it's still much more civilized. So thank God bless America. So thanks, the history went in a way that America is the biggest, not biggest, what, more coherent representation of Atlantis. The better representation of Atlantis than the previous ones. So America is reincarnation of Atlantis and reincarnation of Atlanteans. And Atlantis destroyed itself. And now the Atlanteans, the Atlanteans, replay the Atlantean scenario, hopefully, to prevent the self-destruction of the world. And this time we are divinely guided. There is a plan that we will make it, right? So we are facing another wave of possible self-destruction, and there is lots of hidden alien and angelic forces which are making sure we don't destroy the world. And how do they do this? They do it through us. So that's one of the main messages I'm getting, that let me do the tone. So the message is that, unfortunately, the decision is very strong. The aliens wouldn't come into open during that period. They would wait for us to go through the economic collapse and recovery. And they would wait for the world government to form and invite them. So unfortunately, we have to do it by ourselves. And they bring all sorts of excuses why they don't want to participate. But their main argument is that they don't want to intervene because they want it to look and feel like we are doing it ourselves. They will help in all possible ways except personally showing up. They will, basically, they are us. We are hybrids. We have alien past lives. We have alien connections. We are talking to them. So they will just continue doing the same. They will talk to us, guide us, but we are them, basically. They will work through us. We are now recruiting others, right? We are spreading the world. We invite others to volunteer to be alien voices, alien bodies, alien hands. So Lightworkers, Starseeds, wake up, connect into the grid, and be the positive aliens on Earth. Be the ones who do the work. But basically, their physical ones, four-dimensional ones, will just wait until we fix it. So they will give us advice through channelers. Sometimes angels will do the help, and they're constantly doing the help by manipulating the reality, the matrix. They're fixing things. But basically, with the divine help, we are the ones who are doing the work in that game. So we are the ones who uphold the grid. We are the ones who will form the future leadership, spiritual leadership, and formulate the system. It doesn't have to be hierarchical. It can be distributed leadership. It should be, in my opinion, be a distributed leadership, like tribal elders, not necessarily dictatorial, but other way around. Like in European armies, there is usually a commanding leadership, commanding officers, and there is also their spiritual leadership. Like there is always an officer and a spiritual advisor or something like that. In religious ones, it could be the Christian advisor, but in or whatever faith they are. But in communist ones, it would be communist advisor who would be responsible for spiritual part of communism, right? Which is like contradiction in terms, but really it was called political advisor. But basically, the ones who are connected to the ideas and spiritual side. So that is a possible future for the Earth. We will have practical leadership and also spiritual leadership, like channelers. I don't see how channelers, actually I do see how channelers advise, I do see how channelers could advise the business leaders or whatever. Yeah, business leaders. I see how a business leader can have consultation with spiritual advisors, like many do. Not great many, but some. Some advanced spiritual leaders or business leaders have spiritual advisors and channelers. So I think that would be maybe the future. Some of business leaders could use spiritual advice, and some would be getting it directly, right? Right. So that's, I guess, would be the answer, because otherwise I think we are doomed. If our if we don't get miracles into the system, we can't build a working system. I think everything has been tried and it didn't work. Basically, the main flaw of their existing system is that huge opportunities for deception, right? Allah na Allah. Allah na na Allah na Allah na na ayana So yeah, the huge opportunities for deception. It has been there forever. You can see it have, even in ancient times, deception was, recorded ancient time deception was huge. Bible is full of deceptives. Current life is full of deception. Deception is everywhere. Advertisement by definition is a deception, right? It shouldn't be, right? It should be just information. I offer something, you need it, here is information for you. But it is so messed up, right? So messed up. People are bombarded by deception, and that's why their filters are clogged. They can't get the information because of the excess of it. You can't get to the right information because of access to it. So that's why search engines are so good. You really are more likely to find what you need than otherwise. If you were just passively waiting for the information to come, the chances of you getting the right information are much lower. If you go and search for it and do your homework and research, you're more likely to find it. and it's always distorted. Like right now, I'm looking for books to read, and there is so much stuff which I don't want to read. I don't want to listen. It's something which is their own vibration. And there are few of them which I really love. And how do I find more of the ones which I really? There should be some sort of a search engine which would you would go to one book or movie, and that would give you the movie of similar vibration. And it's not the case. Like EMDb or Amazon or IMDb, a few other search engines where you can find similar books. They give you nonsense. Like, you love this book, but next to it, what they say it's very similar. It's completely different, right? It's like, this one I love and this one I hate. So it would be nice to have it where it is more similar when you go to one and then you get to similar ones. Like recently I started listening to poetry on YouTube. Just, again, it was given to me, but basically I'll go after one poem and listen to it. And next to it there is another poem and another poem, and they all seem to be well selected to my taste. So if I like this one, I would like. So YouTube likeliness, YouTube similarity is more similar than book similarity and movie similarity, which is nice. So I love YouTube. Nice to be on YouTube. Any comments, questions? So the main problem you would meet in there, if and when the crisis will strike, and it might be the mixture of economy, political, and ecological, like earthquakes and economy shakes and little wars here and there. I don't think they will allow big wars. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't. The American army would, or maybe United Army, I would say United American Civilized Army, American and others, not whatever, alliance, American alliance armies would still be the strongest, and that would prevent the global big wars. But will be local squabbles, especially when first economy shakes. That's how usually they fix it. They kind of distract the attention of the global collective by starting a small war in the Middle East. So if economy starts shaking, the first expectation is that it will be shaken little by little, and then there will be little relatively small wars in Middle East, which would distract and release some of the violence. I wouldn't say release, more like distracts from financial problems, distract the people, so the market wouldn't crash as strong. Usually when the war happens, the dollar goes up, which is completely evil, but that's how it works. So the main problem which you would face is depression. So yeah, and staying sane. How would you stay sane, stay positive in the shakeups? And that's art. That's art. When I talk about it, I get back the wave of fear, and some of that is mine, and some of that is you. Like when you listen to me, you get me. That fear, I feel it. I feel it after when I see when I finish my webinars, I feel that wave of fear which comes just from watching me. So yeah, so being strong and being connected to the divine, I guess. Meditate. Like some bad days, I go and meditate almost whole day, intermittently. Like I would do a little work, eat a little, cook a little, do a little stuff, and then go back into meditation. You don't have to meditate by being still. You can meditate doing some errands, doing some work. So that's a possibility. Connecting to people who uplift you. So there is that special type of people who function best in the times of the crisis. Not Chamberlain. Churchill is one of them. You know, when the time is peaceful, he would create a crisis just to be in good functional state. So some fighters are tuned up in a way that they are designed to work best during the fight. I'm not that type. If the crisis happens, my capacity is exhausted like in minutes, and then I'm in emergency stress mode. But some people just can function only when they're in the stress mode. Some of my supervisors were that. So they would create a crisis just to feel good. They would create a fight just to feel good. When it is fight, their attunement, yeah, their tuning is, you know, the nerve. They have enough dopamine, serotonin, and all other chakras and energies and chemicals working perfectly. So I don't know. You have to know yourself. Some of you are good in the crisis mode. Some of you are not, and I'm best in creative mode. When I'm in peace and doing something positive, that's so. So for me, it would be like any creative projects. So that's what I would do: listening, reading to records, and reading books, and staying sane and creating, writing diaries. So creative work would be for me the way to get back into the peace and get connected. All right, so staying connected with the divine is amazing. Now, going out and helping others is a great way to get the energy flow going even when things are going crazy around. Working and helping others, working is having positive creative function. Diaries of Anne Frank, Diaries of Anne Frank, that's an example. Things go crazy around and you're still doing creative writing and stay sane, stay at your highest excitement. And most of you will make it, so don't be that worried about death, right? Just ignore it, accept it first and then ignore it. Accept the disaster and then ignore it. Learning to filter it out is hard, but it's possible. And finding the people who uplift you, I had wonderful helpers. Some of them just gave me a single advice, but that advice was invaluable. And some of them I kept coming to them very frequently to keep me uplifted. And again, you know, you come from a crazy world. You are all scared, all worked out, all stressed. And you come into that vibration of peace and enlightenment. It just happens, yeah. I wish there was like a movie of that kind. You know, in some movies you have that episode where you go fight, you see the suffering and struggle, and then you come somewhere to a monastery or to an apartment, to a kitchen, to a place. There's so many examples. Just of peace. It could be in the middle of disaster, but there would be a bubble of peace. And you get into the bubble and you share what worries you. They reflect on it, and that you come back into that peace. You can do it by yourself, but sometimes you need a helper, and it helps to get a helper. And sometimes in the time of the disaster, people are thrown apart and also thrown together. And it's amazing how, like in the cold, in the cold and danger, it's much safer to be together. There's lots of fairy tales. You know that. Now people live in a huge house by themselves. It's like complete craziness, right? You can meditate, but why do you need the whole house to meditate? You need like that little room to meditate. Everything else is excessive. There is excess of food, excess of energy consumption, excess of everything, right? So in the time of the disaster, staying together in very close proximity is more practical. And also the vibration, keeping up the high vibration, so crowding around people like Jin, crowding around wise men who can uphold the vibration, it's actually happiness. It's love and happiness purified. And Joanna said, you have to think of the greater good and you will feel at peace. Then the new reality is created by your new energy. Yes. Yes. So yeah, some people are grounded in the now. Some people are grounded in the past. Some people are grounded in principles. It's all valid. For me, it's I'm grounded in the future. I don't know how, but that's my design. I would always think of the future. I will always think of opportunities. Always think of the greater good for the future. So you can do that too. Whatever. How Krishna Das says, whatever gets you through the night. Whatever gets you through the night. So think of the future. Think of possibilities. Think how it can be reconstructed. One of the, again, it's a predator type of businessman, but very successful. Craig Venter. I admire him for what he achieved. His approach is to jump without knowing where you will land. Like you would calculate that if I jump and work hard enough, by the time I land there will be a landing platform. So he did it many times in his life, and sometimes he landed in the wrong place, but a few times he made it. Couple times he made it really strong. So he was the first to sequence a genome just by willpower, solar plexus power. And second time he created a synthetic genome for the bacteria and make it live. So there is an emergency crisis now. I have to wrap up. But basically, the last message was, when you get there, you need something, you ask for it, whatever it is. And I meant the structure for the future. When I ask for the structure of the future, when the future happens, you will get the structure. It will be in your hands. You will find it then. If you want strongly, you will find it. And thank you very much for listening. I wish you happiness. I will wish you understanding your role. I wish you connection to the divine. And talk to you soon again. I intend to run these webinars on Sundays at 11. So join me. We'll have Saturday webinar and Sunday. So have a good day. And thank you, the ones who stayed with me, who watch me.